Dear students, so I hope you are enjoying the IIT PAL biology series. Now, very quickly, I would like to summarize some very important things which have been taught to you, especially from an applicational perspective and for you to develop the concept completely. The first thing which I will cover is the importance of Mendel's principles of inheritance. Now, here I would like to mention that when Mendel was doing genetics, there were no computers, every calculation was done by hand. So, it is important for all of us today to appreciate what a remarkable finding it was that one can predict what kind of a color of a flower or what kind of a plant one can get and how many of those particular colors one can get based on starting from a particular color without actually knowing the molecular basis of the gene. So, the principles of heredity which you learned find several applications. One of the most remarkable applications is looking at relatedness of living organisms. Let me try to give you an example from your life. Let us say that you have a friend and let us randomly call him Rahul. Let us say Rahul has a blood type of O. Now, all of you know that blood types are in A, B, O, AB, that is one trait whether the blood type is A or B or AB or O, and another trait is whether it is Rh positive or negative. So, normally in a blood type you have two traits which play a role. The first trait is A or B or AB or O. The second trait is whether it is plus or minus. So, just let us look at this trait first independently. So, let us say Rahul has a blood type of O. Let us say Rahul's mother has a blood type of A. Let us also say Rahul's father has a blood type of B. Now, if the fathers of both mother and father, that is Rahul's grandfathers, both were AB, can you tell me what blood type the grandmothers can be, or can you tell me what blood type the grandmothers cannot be? So, you can actually look for both these, you can solve both these problems in terms of understanding the family pedigree of a blood type. So, let us try to answer the question because it is easier to do for conceptual understanding. What cannot be the blood type of Rahul's grandmothers? How do you solve this? All right. So, now let us say that blood type A is going to result if you are going to have I with a superscript A. This is the dominant phenotype for A, therefore, you get blood type A. If there is any recessive phenotype, you can write it as small I. So, any dominant phenotype would be written as capital I. If it is A, then we will write I superscript A. If it is B, we can write I superscript B. If it is a recessive trait, we will write small I. Now, in these two cases, the blood type would be A. In these two cases, the blood type would be B. Similarly, if you have two dominants I A and I B, the blood type would be A B. Therefore, to have blood type O, Rahul must have both the recessive I's. That means, we can write for Rahul it is this. Now, since Rahul has two I's which are both recessive, that means that one I each must have come from father and mother randomly. So, let us say this came from mom this came from father. Therefore, if the mother is A, then Rahul's mother must be IAI, because it cannot be this, otherwise Rahul would have had one capital or one dominant A phenotype. On the other hand, father has blood type B, therefore, father must be this. Now, let us go back to mother's father first and then father's father first. Now, if mother's father was AB, so mother's father was AB, that means mother's father had this, and the mother got the A from the father. Similarly, father's father must be also this. Since father has this, it must have come from this. Therefore, Rahul's grandmother from the mother's side must have an I. Rahul's grandmother from the father's side must have an I. Is that right? Therefore, if the grandmothers must have one recessive, what cannot they have as a blood type? Well, where both of them are dominant. That means, Rahul's grandmothers cannot have this as their blood type. So, what you can do is definitely rule out whether Rahul's grandmothers were AB or not. You can say with a lot of confidence that they were not the blood group AB. So, this is an important application, and as you can see, you will find application of this not only in forensics, but in times when you need to locate family people, or you need to actually look at which organisms using traits such as blood type are related to each other in what manner, you can actually use these principles of heredity. So, this is one important application which you must keep in mind. The next concept, which is considered to be the one of the toughest concepts from the feedback of students we have received from class 11th and 12th, is photosynthesis. It is assumed that this is a memorization based activity which you have to learn. It is not true. The way you have been taught very beautifully in the IIT PAL biology lecture by your professor, you must realize that the key to understanding the concept in photosynthesis is following the electron. As long as you keep following the electron which is being transferred from one place to another in the photosystems, you will be okay. That is the concept which you have to understand. The important thing to consider before following the electron is essentially that an electron, where is it coming from? So, as you were told, in photosystems, photons hit, and then that is the initiation of transaction of energy taking place. Wavelength of a photon, let us say, is lambda. It is related to the energy being carried in that photon by the de Broglie equation, E equal to h c by lambda. So, other than the concept of following the electron, which you must keep in mind, you must also keep in mind that in the photosystem, if you have wavelength of light which is hitting at a lower wavelength of light, hitting the system is going to provide higher energy, and higher wavelength of light is going to provide lower energy. As long as you keep these analytical concepts in mind, you will be very comfortable understanding photosynthesis conceptually and not require memorization. Finally, you will now start learning a very fascinating aspect of biology called evolution in the next few lectures. A couple of things I want you to actually understand when you are learning about evolution. Please make sure that you are able to relate to the fact that evolution does not happen because someone wants it to happen, it just happens by chance. As an example, if you want to actually right now become resistant to fire, that you can walk in fire, it is not going to happen, because our skin is going to burn, all of us are made of the same material. However, in some group of organisms or some species of organisms, if there is one organism which develops scale by chance and there is a big fire, all the other organisms will die and only that organism who is with scales, who can resist heat, may survive. Now, when this organism survives, it will multiply further, and therefore, the species or group of organisms you see as remaining are only with scales. Now, this is random evolution, right. This is how evolution actually happens. There is no knowing where it will go. So, at the end of understanding the concept of evolution, I want you to think about this. There are two groups of people or humans which you see. The first group has webbed feet. This is a phenotype in which instead of having feet with 5 toes, you actually end up having feet which looked like this. There is one tribe in the world which looks like this. So, that means this is the feet of these humans actually look like this rather than this. Second group of people is who can walk on fire. You must have seen, we have lots of places in India where you have people who can sleep on bed of nails, they can walk on fire with coal and things like that. So, I want you to think in terms of which would be an example of evolution. If you come in this group, will you be, do you think an organism will be born with the capacity to walk on fire, or do you think an organism will be born to walk on webbed feet? My hope is that you will be able to answer such an analytical question based on the lectures of evolution that you will receive in the subsequent series. Thank you.
Hello friends, welcome back to the IIT PAL series of biology. This is your partner in learning Rikisha Bhaumik, PGT Biology from Kendriya Vidyalaya Sector 2, RK Puram. Dear friends, life is dynamic and so is the earth and all the life forms on it. You know that there is a lot of biodiversity and there are so many species which are unknown to us. Do you think that the life forms which we see today has remained as such from the beginning of the life, from the beginning of the earth? No, as I have already told you that life is dynamic. The word dynamic itself means changing. These life forms, the flora and fauna which we see on the earth are changing over a period of millions of years. And to study about this change, I am here to help you. As you might have rightly guessed, today in this session we will be dealing with the topic evolution of your class 12th NCERT biology. So, what will you learn in this session? You will learn about the process of evolution, beginning of universe and how the life originated, various theories for origin of life, what were the theories which were conjectured for the origin of life, theory of use and disuse of organs, then the theory of Charles Darwin which was theory of natural selection. So, before starting this lesson, I would like to give you a flow chart of sequences which took place from the origin point of perspective. As you can see here, the origin of universe. Let me tell you one thing here, that even the universe had a beginning. Before universe there was nothing. What was there was the space, the infinite, large, vast space. The universe did had a beginning which was about 20 billion years back. There may be some variations. It can be said to as 15 to 20 billion years back. So, the universe was originated 20 billion years back. Then the further sequence which arose was the origin of earth, origin of the galaxies, solar system and origin of earth, which was about 4.5 billion years ago. Then the earliest life like structure or the first organic macromolecules which were formed was about 4 billion years ago. And then slowly the atmospheric oxygen started accumulating into the earth's environment, and this took place about 2 billion years ago. Then the earliest eukaryotic cells which emerged was about 1.5 billion years ago. So, you can see that this is the sequence of events which occurred after the universe was originated, universe began. The universe, again let us re-summarize, the origin of universe 20 billion years back. You have to go back to the timeline and then you have to imagine how the process of evolution has occurred. Origin of universe 20 billion years ago, then after the origin of universe for many years there was nothing. Origin of earth took place about 4.5 billion years ago. The earliest life-like molecules which were capable of giving rise to life was formed 4 billion years ago. Atmospheric oxygen started accumulating 2 billion years ago, and the first eukaryotic cells was found 1.5 billion years ago. With this, let us now start and see how the origin of universe, how the origin of earth took place, what were the mechanisms involved in it. The origin of universe, as I told you, took place about 15 to 20 billion years ago. The most plausible theory about the origin of universe is the Big Bang theory, which attempts to explain the origin of universe. The Big Bang theory is the most plausible theory. I am saying this because there has been many theories, but the most logical and most sequential theory which helps us in rationalizing the things is the Big Bang theory. Obviously, since there was nothing present at that time, we do not have any experimental evidence. But for your information, I would like to tell you here that certain experiments you must have heard about Large Hadron Collider, which is taking place to assess whether the Big Bang theory is the correct explanation of the origin of universe. So, what was this Big Bang theory? According to this theory, there was a singular explosion which was unimaginable in physical term. This singular term implies that there was singularity. The singularity is the infinitely dense condensation of whatever was present in the space, and when it exploded there was a kind of formation, and this formation was the formation of universe. We cannot describe it in terms of matter or energy, because the concept of matter and energy again arose after the universe was formed. Before that there was no matter, there was no energy. So, what happened after the Big Bang? After the Big Bang, the universe started expanding, and the expansion we can see even now. Subsequent to the huge explosion, the universe started expanding, temperature came down, and as a result certain gases were formed, which was hydrogen and helium. You must be knowing that hydrogen and helium are the building blocks of most of these stars. In fact, all these stars, the sun, they are made up of hydrogen and helium. And this gave rise to the formation of galaxies. These gases condensed under the forces of gravitation and formed different galaxies. One of the galaxies was our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, in which the solar system is placed. The solar system has the earth in it. Earth is our abode where we live, where we stay. Earth was also formed through this process. This hypothesis is also known as nebular hypothesis. Again, there are many hypotheses which explain the origin of earth, but the most plausible theory which gives a logical sequence of every event is the nebular hypothesis, in which we say that the hydrogen and helium which were formed, there was condensation of these gases under gravitation, and then out of these condensation they started forming the galaxies, and one of the galaxy was the Milky Way galaxy. Now, once you have come to know how the universe originated by the Big Bang. Then I told you that the gases started condensing, the hydrogen and helium were formed, and the galaxies were formed, earth was created. But do you think the earth which was formed similar to the earth which we live in today? Definitely not. The conditions on the primitive earth was very much different from what we see now. Here you can see the picture of earth. It looks green, it looks blue, of different colors. This picture has been taken from space, but this was not the actual form of earth. So, what was earth like? The earth was not at all inhabitable when it was formed. Why? What were the conditions which make it inhospitable, which made it inhabitable? Number one, there was no atmosphere on earth as we see today. There was no free oxygen. Reducing environment was there because of the presence of gases like water vapor, methane, carbon dioxide and ammonia. Can you imagine living in these conditions? Can you imagine living under these type of condition? No, life is not possible under such condition. Moreover, ultraviolet rays could easily penetrate into the surface of the earth. We know that ultraviolet rays are so much harmful for us. The ultraviolet rays are the radiations of the sun which can cause skin cancer and can damage aquatic organisms and plants. So, these UV rays could easily enter into the earth's surface. Then the temperature was very high and there was volcanic eruptions, lightning, electrical discharges. All these conditions were very much prevalent on the primitive earth. It is unimaginable for us to think that the earth could sustain any kind of life form at that time. So, how did then life originate? The big question is, how then life originate? Well, many people tried to explain the theories for origin of life. That is why the conjectured theories for origin of life arose. Conjectured theories are those theories which do not have any logical explanation and which are not supported by any kind of experiment. So, we will briefly see what were those theories for origin of life. Theory of special creation. This was the oldest theory which was given to explain the origin of life. According to this theory, life was created and the earth was created. The earth and the life intact in itself was created in just 6 days. And it also says that earth is just 4000 years old and all the life forms which we see today was also present then. So, the next theory is the theory of panspermia. The theory of panspermia says that there were certain living spores present in the space and these spores were present in space and other planets and they accidentally came to the earth, found a suitable substratum, and this is how life originated on earth. Again, this also is not supported by any logical evidence. Then there was theory of spontaneous generation or abiogenesis. According to this theory of spontaneous generation, life arose gradually from non-living matter. I repeat, this theory is also known as theory of abiogenesis. Abiogenesis refers to the origin of life from non-living matter. Why did it come into existence for the first place? It came into existence because we can see that dead and decayed matter which gives rise to, you can see that whenever there are some dead and decayed matter, certain maggots and flies, they tend to appear over them. So, people thought that these flies and these maggots, they erupted from the non-living dead and decaying matter. but this was not the case. And what was the reality was proved by Louis Pasteur. Here you can see the Louis Pasteur's experiment. So, what did he do? He kept a mixture of sugar and yeast, which he called broth, in a flask. He drew out the neck of the flask into a S shaped. He molded the neck into an S shaped structure. So, this experiment is also popularly known as swan necked flask experiment. Then what did he do? He boiled the content till steam rushed out and cooled. The content of the flask was observed for many days, and he saw that from this broth no living organism could emerge or erupt. Then he repeated his experiment, but this time with a modification. The curved neck which was present in his earlier experiment was broken, was removed, and then he again observed it for some days. And this time he could observe growth of certain microbes. So, what can you conclude through this experiment? Yes, you are right in your thinking that in the first experiment which he did, since the neck was swan shaped, the microorganisms could not enter into this, and it was also sterilized. Secondly, in the second experiment which we see, since the neck was cut, the microbes could easily grow over the dead and decayed matter which was present in the broth, and this resulted in the coming of the spores and the formation of certain maggots and flies. So, this theory, Louis Pasteur's theory, is also known as theory of biogenesis. The theory of biogenesis states that life can only arise from pre-existing life forms. So, this theory of biogenesis could convincingly discard the theory of abiogenesis, that life theory of abiogenesis, or the theory of spontaneous generation, that life could emerge from non-living matter. Before Louis Pasteur experiment, certain other scientists also attempted trying to disprove this theory, and similar experiments were done by Francisco Redi and Splanzini, but the most convincing experiment was done by Louis Pasteur. So, I think that these theories are quite clear to you. The conjectured theories which we did, the first one was theory of special creation, which believe in supernatural powers, under which in 6 days all the lives was created on the earth. Then we did the theory of spontaneous generation and theory of panspermia. Now, we agree to this fact that when the life originated, afterward all life forms has arisen from the pre-existing life forms. But what about the first life form? How did it originated? Well, we again have a theory or a hypothesis for this, and this theory was given by Oparin and Haldane. This theory is also known as theory of chemical evolution. This theory explains that formation of life was preceded by chemical evolution. Oparin and Haldane of England proposed that the first form of life could have come from pre-existing non-living organic molecules like RNA, proteins, etc. Dear friends, you know very well that there are certain molecules, the biomolecules, which are present inside our cells, and it is the interaction, it is the movement of these molecules which gives us a defining feature. So, the most logical thing which can be explained is that these non-living organic molecules were formed first, and from these non-living organic molecules first life might have arose. So, this condition which was present on the earth at that time, which could support the theory of chemical evolution or chemical genesis of life, is also described by Haldane as the hot dilute soup. This suggests that the condition present on primitive earth was suitable for the synthesis of carbohydrates, fats, amino acids and other complex organic substances. These carbohydrate, fats, amino acids, these are the building blocks of the biomolecules present in our cells. And the synthesis probably occurred in sea. We know that the first life which arose was in water. The simple organic molecules further polymerized to form complex organic molecule. So, let me put it in this way, that the simple biomolecules were formed, carbohydrates, RNA, proteins, because of the sequence of chemical reaction which took place due to the conditions which were present on the primitive earth. And then from these biomolecules, these simple molecules, they could aggregate and they could further polymerize, condense to form complex organic molecules. Now, the experimental evidence for chemical theory of evolution. So, this hypothesis of Oparin and Haldane appears quite logical in explaining the sequence of events which might have occurred on the primitive earth. As we know that the earth was very different from what we know today, and the conditions were quite appropriate for the chemical evolution of life to take place. But this was supported by an experiment which was done by Miller and Urey. Stanley Miller and Harold Urey in 1953 created conditions similar to the primitive earth on a laboratory scale. See this figure. In this figure you can see that they devised an apparatus in which there was a conical flask containing all the ingredients which were present on the primitive earth. The gases which were present were methane, ammonia, water vapor, hydrogen, and they made arrangement for the water, for condensation of the water vapor, so that the water may be formed, and here they could collect certain substances, a vacuum pump, then the electrodes were present for the electrical discharges. So, when they did this experiment, they created the conditions similar to the primitive earth under a laboratory scale, and they provided the electrical discharges and a high temperature was maintained. They were actually able to observe the formation of amino acids. You know very well that amino acids are the building blocks of proteins, and so this theory appeared to be plausible theory for explaining the origin of life. The origin of life is supported by the theory of chemical evolution, that the first life which arose could be because of chemical evolution. Similar experiments were subsequently done by many scientists, and they were also able to obtain other kind of molecules like sugars, nitrogenous bases, pigments and fats. So, with this, now we will move on to the next topic, which is the origin of cellular forms. So, we are progressing from right from the beginning of universe to the formation of earth, then the condition on the primitive earth, then how life originated in the first place. It was the primitive conditions which led to a kind of chemical reaction and led to the formation of simpler biomolecules. These simpler biomolecules could again aggregate and condense to form a complex biomolecule. But what about the first cell? We are still restricting ourselves to the formation of biomolecules. How the cell was created? The cell, which is the basic unit of life, the structural and functional unit of life. So, in order to study about the cellular forms, the origin of cellular forms, we should know about certain terms. Coacervates. Coacervates were the large colloidal particles. These are the names given to the large colloidal particles which were formed because of the tendency of these organic macromolecules to aggregate together. So, what are coacervates? Coacervates are nothing but they are actually the aggregation of the organic macromolecules. So, the coacervates were formed once the biomolecules were formed. Then because of their tendency to aggregate together, they formed coacervates. Then Sidney Fox was the scientist who could form proteinoids. Proteinoids were like primitive protein structures, and Sidney Fox again observed that these proteinoids could arrange themselves in a membrane bound spheres that appeared cell like, and they could also undergo fission and budding like the prokaryotes. So, we see that how the macromolecules were formed, then out of the macromolecules they aggregated to form the coacervates, and then they are forming a membrane bound sphere which was known as microsphere. And the first membrane bound cell which was formed was due to the spontaneous assembly of the phospholipid molecules which were generated by the process of chemical evolution. So, this first membrane bound cell which was formed was a very important event in the sequence of evolution. The formation of a membrane was again, to reiterate, I would like to say that the formation of membrane was actually the starting of life on earth when the cells were formed. So, the first cellular form originated about 2 billion years ago, and it was probably a single cell, and the environment was the water environment. The first cell was formed in the water. So, to conclude what we have studied up till now, what can you conclude about the origin and evolution of life on earth? The thing which are very clear from this discussion is that the first form of life which arose was from non-living molecules. These molecules are the biomolecules, and this theory is the theory of chemical evolution. But after this process of chemical evolution, once formed, the life then arose from other life forms. Since then, no chemical evolution has occurred because the condition of earth changed gradually. The reducing atmosphere started becoming oxidizing because of these coacervates and microspheres. Release of oxygen became abundant in the atmosphere, ozone layer started appearing, and there were many changes. Temperature declined, the water was present on the earth, the water vapor which could easily evaporate because of the high temperature, and then again fell down as water, and this sequence continued for many time, and this led to the formation of water and reduction of temperature. So, once the chemical evolution took place, the condition on earth also changed, and after the chemical evolution of macromolecules took place, the life which arose, the cell, the first cell which come, after that all life have arose from the pre-existing life forms. I hope this is clear till now. So, this theory is known as theory of biogenesis. So, we can sum up by saying that the first life which arose was from non-living matter, which is the chemical evolution, and the life which subsequently arose was from the pre-existing life forms. This is the theory of biogenesis. So, now coming to what exactly is evolution? What is evolution? Is the origin of earth, origin of universe evolution? No. The origin of earth, origin of life is not evolution, but how these life forms has changed over a period of years, over a period of time is actually the biological evolution. So, the biological evolution is also known as descent with modification. Descent with modification means that the life forms are appearing generation to generation on this earth with certain changes, and these changes, why do these changes arise? These changes arise because of the environmental responses. The environment is changing, and in order to cope with the changing environment, the organisms are also modifying themselves. So, to be specific, we can say that biological evolution refers to the descent with modification. So, we can define it in these terms. Evolution refers to the process of gradual changes in an organism over a period of time in response to the environmental changes. Evolutionary biology is the study of history of life forms on earth. So, this is again a branch of biology which deals with the study of history of life forms on earth, how the life forms changed with the period of time is dealt in the evolutionary biology. And the evolutionary theory deals with how life changed after its origin. Evolutionary theories are those theories which will deal with the change of the life form since its origin. So, to be more specific, in evolution we majorly deal with the changes which has come once the life originated, the changes which have come in the life forms after a period of time or over a period of time is covered under this field, the biological evolution. And you also know that certain species which are present today were not present earlier. This means that new species has arisen. Similarly, there are certain species which are no more present today and they have become extinct. So, this is the process which is very dynamic. It is taking place slowly and steadily, but yes, evolution is taking place. Regardless of how life started, afterward it branched and diversified and gave rise to the biodiversity which we observe today. So, now coming to the theories of evolution. To again emphasize, previously we were seeing the theories of origin of life and now we will be dealing with the theories of evolution, how the life forms have since then evolved. So, the first theory, the first logical theory which came into existence was the theory of Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck in 1809, and this theory is also known as the theory of use and disuse of organs or the theory of inheritance of acquired characteristics. I suppose you must be knowing the difference between the inherited characters and the acquired characters. Inherited characters are those which can be transmitted from one generation to the next, and acquired are those that we acquire from our environment. So, this theory is the theory of inheritance of acquired characteristics. It was given by Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck in 1809. So, what does this theory says? This theory says that organisms have certain needs. The modification of an old organ or formation of a new one is the result of a new need. If an organism has a need or a new need, it can, as per its need, modify its old organs or form new organs. This was the postulate according to the Lamarck. He also stated that if an organ is used continuously, it will develop, it will highly develop, but on the other hand, if it is disused or if it is not used at all, then the organ will degenerate. And he also added that these changes which are brought about during the life of an individual becomes hereditary. Becomes hereditary means that it will be transferred to the next generation. So, you have to remember these postulates of Lamarck, that organisms have needs and these needs leads to the modification of the older organs or the formation of new organs. If the organ is used continuously, it will develop, and if it is not used at all, it will degenerate. The changes which are brought about during the life of an individual will become hereditary and will be transmitted to the next generation. So, what led Lamarck to give these postulates? Actually, he observed many things, and the most famous example which is given in support of Lamarck's theory is that of giraffe. As you can see in this figure, that the giraffes are supposed to have shorter neck in earlier times. There was ample grasses and it could feed on the grasses. It was a grazing animal, but with time, when the grasses became scarce, it had to stretch its neck in order to feed on the leaves of the tree. over a period of time, because of the continuous use of the neck, because of the continuous stretching of necks, as per Lamarck, the neck of giraffe got elongated. Similar examples were also cited by Lamarck, such as reduced eyes in moles because of its burrowing habitat, then reduced pinna in humans because we do not live in jungles anymore and we need not be alert every time as compared to other mammals. They have, for example, rabbits, they have a long pinna, ear pinna, in order to capture the sounds, but our pinna has reduced in size. Absence of limbs in the snakes have evolved from the reptiles, and reptiles had limbs, but snakes does not have limbs because of its creeping habit. Then the flightless birds like kiwi and ostrich, these became flightless. They evolved from the birds having wings, but they became flightless because of the fact that they went to such places like New Zealand where there was no competition for them and there was ample food, and so they didn't need to fly from one place to other for the search of food, and this lead to reduced wings or loss of the ability to fly in them. So, these are certain examples which support Lamarck's theory, but is it sound convincing to you? No, it does not sound convincing to us, because on the flip side there are many criticisms to Lamarck's theory. Number 1, he said that new need gave rise to new organs. Now new need give rise to new organ, but we know that man has desired to fly, and if this new need, this desire to fly was so strong, we would have developed wings till now, but this is not the case with us. The second postulate, he said that the continuous use of organs make it highly developed, but many a times evolution shows exactly the opposite. For instance, we use eyes for reading. The voracious readers, they read throughout their life, but does this make their eyesight more powerful? No. We know that because of aging, the eyesight reduces, the vision reduces, and there is no improvement or development of our eyesight if we are continuously using it. Thirdly, the characters acquired by an organism as a response to the environment is temporary and cannot be inherited. How can acquired characters be inherited? Is it possible? This postulate was strongly rejected by Weizmann, who did certain experiment. He continuously cut the tails of the mice generation after generation for at least 22 generation, and even after 22 generation, the 23rd mice which was born had a tail as long as its ancestor. This shows that the characters are not getting inherited. The acquired character, which was the cutting of the tail, it was not inherited from one generation to the next. The tail emerged in every generation, even in the 23rd generation. So, Lamarck's theory was rejected, but this theory is again very important because it was the first truly mechanistic theory of evolution. By mechanistic theory of evolution, we mean that it was the first theory which tried to explain the mechanism of evolution, how evolution operates. So, with Lamarck, now we will go to Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin, you are very much aware about Charles Darwin. He is a famous naturalist, scientist, father of evolution, and a great inspiration to all. He actually followed the scientific method, and how did he explode about his theory? The interesting thing is that in 1831 he went on a sea voyage in a ship called HMS Beagle round the world, and during this voyage, which lasted for 5 years, he made certain interesting observations. These observations we will discuss in detail when we take the topic of adaptive radiation in our next session. But in his voyage, what he concluded was very important. he concluded that all the existing life forms shared similarities to varying degrees not only among themselves but also with life forms that existed million years ago. I repeat, I would like to explain it further, that all the existing life form shared similarities to varying degrees not only among themselves. All the organisms, they share certain similarities among themselves, but also with those organisms, with those life forms which existed millions of years ago. Charles Darwin is a true inspiration for a science student. I would like to make a mention here that Charles Darwin tried to explore, tried to find out the mechanism of evolution because of the scientific method which he followed. It was his great observational skills, it was his ability to analyze the things, record the things, and then coming to a conclusion, coming to a logical conclusion which made him so much famous. So, Charles Darwin was also influenced by the work of other scientists. It was not his sole work, he did a great work, but he was also considerate about the other work which could in any way help his work. For example, the work of Thomas Malthus on population influenced Darwin very much. What did he say? He said that theoretically population will grow exponentially if everybody could reproduce maximally. If there is no competition, the organism has this tendency, they can reproduce exponentially and then the population will also grow exponentially. So, they can reproduce to the maximum extent and increase their population. But does it happen in reality? No, this does not appear in reality. Population does not increase at exponential rates. Population in reality are limited. It means that there had been competition for resources because the resources are limited. The resources are limited and there has been competition between organisms. Only some survived and grew at the cost of others that could not flourish. So, this postulate of Thomas Malthus on population influenced Darwin, and he also talked about the struggle for existence which exists in nature. Darwin asserted that variations which are heritable and make resources utilization better for few will enable only those to reproduce and leave more progeny. So, I would explain this statement. Darwin asserted that variations which are heritable, so variations which can be inherited from one generation to the next and makes resources utilization better, those variations which are beneficial to the organism, beneficial in the sense that it can help in utilizing the resources better, will enable them to reproduce, and once they have this reproductive ability, reproductive fitness, they will leave more progeny and they will flourish. The work of Alfred Russel Wallace was also similar to that of Charles Darwin. Alfred Russel Wallace made observation which were similar to that of Charles Darwin during his voyage to Malay archipelago. He also was a naturalist and he went to a different islands, Malay archipelago, and he also observed similar kind of things as observed by Charles Darwin. In 1858, he formulated his theory in an essay form, and the main points of his essay was that all existing life forms share similarities and share common ancestor. All the existing life forms, they have similarities among themselves as well as similarities with the ancestor, and all have come from the common ancestors. These ancestors were present at different periods in the history of earth. We know that earth has evolved, life has evolved since the origin of first life, and the ancestors were maybe present at different period of time, but they share common ancestors. Geological history of earth closely correlates with the biological history of earth. That means the changes which appeared in earth is correlated with the changes which appeared in the life forms. So, Alfred Russel Wallace gave support to Charles Darwin by which he could put up his work in a confident manner. This time the 19th century was a very remarkable period when all the orthodox and all the conjectured theories were questioned strongly by the work of these scientists. Charles Darwin could successfully put his theory of natural selection. So, what is natural selection? Given by Charles Darwin in his book, The Theory of Natural Selection was given by Charles Darwin. The book which he published and put his idea was The Origin of Species by Natural Selection in 1859. This was a widely accepted theory and in fact became the basis of modern evolutionary theory. According to this theory, there has been gradual evolution of life forms. The life forms has been slowly and steadily changing over a period of time. Any population has built-in variation in characteristics. The second postulate says that the population has built-in variation. There are certain variations in their characteristics and these characteristics can help them in providing the fitness criteria. Survival of the fittest or natural selection. Those features, those variations which enable an organism to better adapt to the changing environmental condition will increase its fitness. The fitness which is referred to is the reproductive fitness. If an organism is able to successfully reproduce and increase its progeny and increase its population and flourish, then that will be the natural selection. Natural selection means that nature will select the beneficial aspects, nature will select only those characteristics, only those organisms will survive which will have better adaptations or better features. So, let us summarize what we have covered till now. Today we learnt about the origin of universe, galaxies and earth, the conditions which were present on the primitive earth, theories for origin of life, how the life originated at first place, then theory of biogenesis, Oparin and Halden's theory of chemical evolution, Miller and Urey's experiment, meaning of biological evolution, theories of evolution which was given by Lamarck and Charles Darwin. So, I think we have discussed half of the chapter today in this session and the rest we will be covering in the next session. The natural selection which we have left incomplete will be again dealt in detail in my next session. But before leaving, I would like you to reflect over certain questions. First, is it possible to have chemical evolution of life in the present conditions of earth? Do you think that under the present condition of earth, chemical evolution can still take place? Second, do you agree that the rate of appearance of new forms is linked to the life cycle or lifespan of an organism? This means that the rate of appearance of new forms, the rate of appearance of new life forms which are arising is linked to the life cycle or the lifespan. For instance, if an organism has a short lifespan, will it reproduce faster, and if an organism has a longer lifespan, it will reproduce at a slow rate, and is it related to the evolution in any way? Then next question, nature selects for fitness, which are inherited characteristics. Nature selects for fitness. This fitness, the characteristics which are enabling an organism to survive the conditions and reproduce its progeny, the fitness which are inherited characters, these are inherited characteristics. Can you suggest the means by which these characters can be inherited? What are the ways through which these are inherited? What leads to the characters of acquisition of characters and which characters are inherited? What are responsible for them? And the last question which I would like you to reflect over is that is evolution a process or result of some process? So, with these questions, I expect that your curiosity level has been enhanced, so that when we meet in the next session, we will be continuing with our session. Thank you very much.